Once you're settled, feel free to write in the chat where you're joining us from. I'm Miriam Diamond, Program Director of the Encore Boston Network. And our organization helps people 50 plus make a difference through work, social action, and service. You can learn more about Encore Boston Network on our website, which is where you signed up, encorebostonnetwork.org. Feel free to check out the website, all kinds of resources, events. Sign up for our monthly newsletter. You can be a member. Everything is free. Now, these days, that is amazing. Let me tell you, one of the things I love about this is being able to tell people it's free, no strings attached. This event is going to be recorded, so you can look at it later. We'll send you an email within the next week with the link and including other resources. Feel free to share it with friends. Feel free to look at it again. Whatever you'd like to do, there's going to be a lot of interesting information. You might want to review it again, so feel free to do that. Throughout the program, feel free to add comments, react to whatever we have to say. You can, if questions come to your mind, feel free to write them up as we're going through, as our presenters going through the session. We will have a Q&A session at the end. It helps if you write the word question before your question so it stands out from the comments and other things people are going to be listing. And if you find closed captioning helpful, you are welcome to put that on. Today, our topic is finding and tapping the hidden job market. So do you know that only 15 to 20% of jobs that are open are posted publicly? Most get filled in other ways. And yet we find that most job hunters, when they're job hunting, what do? They go online, they go to job posting, job boards as their main job strategy. So today we're going to help you understand the best way to use your time and energy when looking for a job. We'll help you get informed and smart about your job search strategy so that you can be successful. We're going to talk about tactics for finding work before it gets publicized and empower you to engage in high-power networking. Our expert today is Nancy Collamer. She's a career coach and author of Second Act Careers, 50 plus ways to profit from your passions during semi-retirement. She writes for places like nextavenue.org for PBS and Forbes and many other media outlets. And she was a human resources executive, so she knows how this works from the inside. She's spoken everywhere around the country, and I will now turn things over to Nancy. Welcome, Nancy.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everyone for joining in on the call today. If you'll just give me a moment now, I am going to share my screen. Okay, so as you know, we are here today to talk about the hidden job market. And so my objectives today are to do a couple of things. The first is to make sure that we are all on the same page as to what we mean by the hidden job market. Second, to talk about how jobs really do get filled. And, spoiler alert, it's not on the job boards. We are going to talk about the 3 keys to cracking the hidden job market. And then we'll talk about some tips and strategies that you can use to improve your odds for success. And I am going to leave ample time at the end for question and answers. So if you have questions as I'm going along, as Miriam said, just put them into the chat and we'll get to those at the end. So what is the hidden job market? And thanks to Doug Dixon for providing the graphic here. But as you can see, basically, this is a picture of an iceberg. And the job postings that you see online are just the tip of the iceberg. What happens with companies is that there is a need or a problem that needs to be solved. And typically that exists for a fairly long period of time. Getting some feedback. Can everyone please make sure that they are on mute? typically those needs exist for a fairly long period of time before companies actually begin the process of filling a job to address those needs. And the way that companies typically fill those jobs is first they go to internal candidates, then they begin to pull from referrals. Sometimes they put the job out to recruiters, and if they can't fill it those ways, then they post the job. And when you think about it, it's exactly the way that you hire people to do work in your house. So think about what the process that you go through when you go to, let's say, hire a painter to paint your house. What do you do? Well, the first thing you do is you reach out to people that you've used before, right? This is the equivalent of companies turning to their existing employees. They know them, they know the quality of the work. It's the easiest place for them to turn to for attractive candidates. But if that doesn't work, then you ask friends for referrals. And I put a star next to this one because that is the most typical way most of us get people, right? I recently moved when I was looking for painters, when I was looking for doctors, all of those service providers, I got through referrals. Now, if that doesn't work, maybe you respond to a direct mail pitch. You know, we all get those Val packs in the mail, and you know, you see that you get one from a painter, and maybe they're offering a discount. Sometimes those can work. Or, you know, last resort, you might search online using some keywords. I might put in, you know, painter, Langhorne, Pennsylvania, see what pops up. And maybe if I really get desperate, then what I do is I might post the opportunity on a site like homeadvisor.com, but that's probably my strategy of last resort. And because of this, the same thing happens in the job market. And as Miriam said before, only about 15% of jobs get posted online. And making matters worse, of the 15% of the jobs that get posted, it's not as though those are the best jobs or those are the jobs that are the most attractive jobs. If anything, it tends to be the sort of lower level and mid-tier jobs. The best jobs almost never get posted online. And it can be really problematic for job seekers because once a job gets posted, the number of people who are going to apply to those jobs increases dramatically. So suddenly a job that had you heard about it through networking or through referrals, maybe there would have been 5, 10 candidates. Suddenly there are 500 other people that you are competing against. The hiring process just becomes much more rigid. Oftentimes, because the job is posted, now you have to go through the HR department, and then you go through another screen before you can get to the hiring manager. And particularly for older people, this makes the process a whole lot more problematic. And I'm sure you've all experienced this. People say, you know, when I put my resume online, it's just like it's a big black hole. And so it's, you know, when you stop and think about it, it's logical why you're not getting responses. And yet, you know, Doug said to me when he put out a survey to people, people are spending a lot of time on the job boards because it's something you can do and it's relatively easy. And so today, my goal is to share with you some other actions you can take that hopefully will be a lot more effective than simply responding to the job postings that are online. The other reason why job postings don't work terribly well is that it's a headache for employers too. You know, if you're a recruiter, and I can tell you this, having worked in HR, and I also worked as a recruiter, once we posted something, we would get inundated with resumes, and it was a huge headache. So whatever I could do to avoid it, I would do. So how are jobs getting filled instead? Again, and I know you've all heard this many, many times before, the majority of jobs get filled through networking or referrals. So where does that leave you? Well, I think there are really three keys to success when you're trying to get to the hidden job market. And again, by the hidden job market, what we mean are the jobs that have not yet been posted. And the first thing is to identify and connect with employers when they are in the need stage, when they're at the point where the need exists, but they have not yet publicly posted the job. That's the sweet spot. The second thing is you want to make your online presence more attractive to recruiters, because recruiters are using sites like LinkedIn to find candidates, and they are consistently looking at those sites. They are building their pool of candidates that they go to once companies have a need for a specific job. So you want to do some things to make your online presence more attractive so you can be in that pool of candidates before the jobs get posted. And third, we will talk, this is not a webinar about networking. I know that this group has done a lot of work to talk about networking in the past. There's lots of information you can find about networking online, but it is really important to become a more consistent and authentic networker. All right, so what are some specific things you can do to find the jobs before they get posted? And, you know, without a doubt, the most important thing you can do is to reach out to your network and begin to conduct some informational interviews. And a good informational interview is really, it's partly about research, but it's also partly about building rapport. It is not about asking for a job. It's about getting information so that you can learn about what's happening in an industry, what's happening in a company, what their pain points are, and then you can use that information as part of your research. And speaking of research, here are some things that all of you can do starting today. First thing is set up Google alerts on companies and industries of interest. This is, you just go to Google, they make it very easy to set up alerts. And that way on a daily basis or weekly basis, you can set the filters accordingly. You will get information about what's happening with a company or within a specific industry. And by doing this, you can learn about company news, if they have new hires, if people have been promoted, maybe someone in your network has been promoted, and you can send them a note of congratulations. And you can keep track of what's happening in a company and get an idea of their needs and their plans for the future. One of the really nice things that you can do as you begin to use Google Alerts and you track companies and industries is you can share some of that information on sites like LinkedIn, which helps to build your profile and helps to build your network. And you can share that information, and that is so it's useful for both you and in terms of expanding your network. And going along with that same idea, you know, begin to follow a select list of companies and people on social media. JobBite did a survey recently where they found that 58% of recruiters said that they're using social media, and that includes sites in addition to LinkedIn like Facebook and Instagram, to promote their brands and to connect to talent. Now, I know before I said, you know, the job boards are of limited value, and they are in terms of actually getting interviews. But the job boards can actually be very, very helpful from a research standpoint. So what I usually suggest to people is it's helpful to monitor a few of those job boards. You can set up alerts on them. I would pick one of the big ones, something like Indeed.com. And then find a couple of niche job boards, because when you follow niche job boards or industry specific job boards, those actually can be extremely helpful. And by monitoring them, you can see which companies are hiring. You may not see a job that is right for you, but you can get a sense of who's in a growth mode. You will also get a feel for what the keywords are that are important for you to integrate into your resume and your LinkedIn profile. You can also get a sense for company culture. And I think that is critically important for people over 50. You know, is everything that you're seeing that's connected with this company, are they saying, you know, we're looking for digital natives, we're looking, there are all sorts of sort of keywords that they can use, excuse me, code words that they can use, excuse me, that will give you the sense that, hey, this is a company that really is much more interested in younger people than in older people. So it's a good way to get a feel for company culture. Increasingly more companies are being a little bit more transparent about compensation, so you can get a good sense of that. Different job boards, things like Glassdoor or Indeed, if you look at their company sections, you can learn about compensation, and you can see other employees' comments about the company. So you can learn a lot about these companies. So I think the job boards can be very valuable, but just don't spend more, since only 15% of jobs are found there. My suggestion is try not to spend any more than 15% of your time on the job boards. Really try to monitor how much time you're spending on the job boards. Something else that you can do, and this actually has become much easier since the pandemic, is to attend industry webinars and conferences. And the reason it's become easier since the pandemic is a lot of this is taking place online. And by doing this, you can learn about industry trends. You can sometimes discover niche players or smaller companies. And certainly my observation has been that smaller companies tend to be better for older job seekers. You can learn about in-demand certifications or skills that, you know, what's up and coming. When you connect, and I think industry associations are an invaluable tool for really helping you to not only learn about an industry, but you can learn about different types of trainings and certification programs that you might be able to enroll in that can really help your marketability. And by attending these webinars and conferences, it can be a nice way to connect to influencers and also expand your network. Another thing that you can do, and I know that I'm preaching to the choir here, is to join a job search support group. And, you know, looking for a job is just, it's not fun. It can be a very lonely process. It can be, quite frankly, a very depressing process. And job search support groups can really help you with that. They are a great way for people to get emotional support, wonderful venues for sharing information and leads. They can help you build and expand your network. And I think that, again, is particularly important for people over 50 to think in terms of expanding your network to younger people. Because one of the big problems people over 50 face is that your network begins to age out. The people who you know retire. And so it's critically important to, over time, make connections with younger people, and they can be a great source of ideas and give you a different perspective on what's happening in the job market. And it also can be critically important to the job search. And when you meet with other people in a job search support group, I think one of the really key things that happens is they are all looking for jobs as well. And many times they find out information about specific companies or specific jobs that are not right for them, but it might be right for you. And so people are great at sharing leads and ideas, and that can be extremely useful. Okay, so before I mention the importance of making your LinkedIn profile more attractive to recruiters, and this is critically important to do because, as I said before, what happens in terms of the hidden job market is recruiters are continually looking at LinkedIn to identify candidates who they might be able to reach out to in the future, even if they don't have a current job opening. So you want to get on the recruiter's radar screen. And in order to do that, and again, this is a topic that I know has been addressed before by this group. And certainly if you just Google, LinkedIn profiles, there are dozens of articles about specifics, but a couple of suggestions that I have is first, you really do want to refine your keywords to make sure that the keywords you're using in your profile line up with the type of roles that you're seeking. Another thing that you want to do is actually, you want to expand the number of connections that you have on LinkedIn, because the more connections that you have, the higher your, LinkedIn uses all sorts of algorithms to rank people, and that helps with boosting your algorithm, with boosting your ranking. So I'm not suggesting that you just, go out there and connect with anyone, but this can be a good opportunity for you to really think about who are some people that it might be useful for me to connect with on LinkedIn. And also be active on the site. Share articles, congratulate people when they get promotions, make comments on people's posts. All of this will help your ranking on LinkedIn too, and make it more likely that you will get noticed by recruiters. Okay, the next one is something that people always seem surprisingly puzzled by, which is that it's okay to contact employers directly, even when they don't have a job listed. Just this morning, I got an email from a job search group. It's called Get5, and they commented in that email that 35% of their job hunters got meetings by contacting companies directly. And I can't stress this point enough, that if you develop a list of 5 to 10 companies that you're interested in, and you identify the hiring manager for the particular roles that you're interested in, and then you put together a pain letter, what a pain letter is a letter that says essentially, hey, I've noticed this is where you have some areas, you have some problems, you have some pain. I mean, you don't put it that way, but that's what you do. You address, hey, I've noticed that you're, expanding into this area, and here's how I can help solve the problem. If you want a great read on a step-by-step on how to write a pain letter, I suggest this article that's on Forbes by Liz Ryan. It's called How to Write a Pain Letter Step-by-Step. And she goes through the different steps that you go through to put together a short but effective letter. And here's the thing, people always say to me, well, if I do that, what if the company doesn't have a job open? Chances are you're going to write to them at a point that there isn't a specific job opening. But if you can establish the connection, and if you can get a meeting and you can talk with someone, then when an opening becomes available, you will be top of mind. And the other thing is, you never know when they might have a project or a temporary gig that you might be suitable for. So this takes work. It's not easy, but it's far more effective than just applying to jobs online. And as I said before, gig or temp work can be incredibly valuable when looking for full-time work. And it's valuable in a couple of different ways. The first thing is when you go in and you take on a project or you take on a temp assignment, it's a good way to beef up your skills. You gain some new skills that you can then add to your resume and your LinkedIn profile. It's also a fantastic way to check out potential employers. I will tell you that when I first graduated from college and I was looking for a job, and at the time I was living in Connecticut, I had just moved to the area. And I had a friend of mine who said, would you be willing to come in our switchboard operator? I'm really dating myself here by saying switchboard operator, but that's what the company had back in the time. He said, she's going to be out for a week. Would you be willing to come in and work as a switchboard operator? And I thought, I just got my bachelor's degree and now I'm going to go in for a week and work as a switchboard operator. And my first instinct was to sort of be horrified, but I had just moved to the area and I thought, all right, what the heck? Well, guess what happened? I went in there, I worked as a switchboard operator, and truth be told, I probably cut off the first 5 people who called in because I had no idea what I was doing. But I ended up sort of being able to be the fly in the wall. I got to see that people seemed to really enjoy working at the company. People were very friendly. I ended up chatting with several people during the course of the week. At the end of the week, the president of the company, was a relatively small company, stopped by and he said, hey, thanks very much, for helping us out this week. And I said, you're most welcome. And he looked at me and he said, I have a feeling this isn't what you normally do. And I said, that's right. And I said, I'm looking for something in human resources. If you hear of anything, here's my resume. I gave him my resume. Well, 6 months later, their long-term HR manager retired, and guess who got the job? Now, I can't promise you that will happen every time you have a temp job, but the point here is by going in and doing temp work or project work and getting into a company, you never know what can happen. And speaking of, there was just a great article that was published on Next Avenue last week where someone wrote about this very phenomenon, where she said she went in, she worked as a temp, and it led to all sorts of interesting connections. So you don't know. And here again, it's far better than sitting at home and just throwing your resume into that black hole. Okay, so hopefully I've given you a couple of ideas about things that you can put into play today after leaving the webinar. And without, again, I know, cue the eye rolls. Everyone's going to be like, oh God, she's going to talk about networking again. I know you're sick and tired of hearing about networking, but networking is the cornerstone for every job search. It just is. And so it's critically important to make it a habit. Whether you're out of work now, whether you're in a job, networking needs to be a habit. It shouldn't be something that you pull into play at the point that you lose your job. Another thing that is critical about networking is to be clear about how others can help you. When you call somebody for a networking meeting, you want to be very crisp and clear about how they can be of service to you, and in turn, how you can be of service to them, because networking needs to be a two-way street. Again, I want to emphasize the point about building intergenerational network. I think as people get older, that becomes more and more important. And finally, and I can't even believe that I have to bring this up, when you have a networking meeting with someone, whether they give you 10 minutes of their time or an hour of their time, please send an email expressing your thanks. It doesn't have to be a written note, but I can't tell you how often I have a networking meeting with someone and then I don't get anything in response. And it's not just me. I hear this from all sorts of people. It is bad form. It only takes literally 2 minutes to type out, thanks so much for taking the time to speak with me today. I found your insights about X or Y invaluable. I look forward to following up with you soon. Please feel free to reach out to me if I can help you in any way. Thanks. That's all you have to do. Literally takes 2 minutes. But by not doing it, you really don't help yourself at all. Okay, so as I said before, I did want to leave a lot of time here for questions and answers because I know people have a lot of questions about this topic. But before getting into that, a couple of resources that I want to share that I think are particularly valuable. And obviously, I've paid attention to this space for a long time. And there is, no shortage of information on this subject that's out there, but some resources I find particularly useful. The first is a book. It's called The 2-Hour Job Search by Steve Dalton. And in this book, he talks about how you go about identifying your target list of companies and about how you can go connect with them on LinkedIn. And I think it's one of the best books out there on the job search. Another one that is very useful is a book called Switchers. It's by Dr. Dawn Graham. She used to be affiliated with the Wharton School of Business with their career services. She's since moved on to KPMG. She also has a podcast and a blog, which I think you'll find very helpful. And then, as I said, there are no shortage of bloggers and writers on this subject, but two that I think are particularly good. One is Hannah Morgan, who is with careersherpa.com. And the other one is Sarah Johnson, and she is with briefcasecoach.com. So with that, I am going to stop my screen share and I am going to open it up for questions.
Thank you, Nancy. We've got a bunch of questions and I encourage people to keep adding them. It's helpful if you write the word question before your questions. And there have been some people offering some answers, but we want to hear your suggestions as well. One is, how do you find a job search support group? And our co-sponsor, 50 Plus Job Seekers, is one way, but we'd like to hear more from you if you have other suggestions.
Sure. So I would say start off with that because I know that you all do great work. But sometimes it's really most helpful to meet with people locally. So go to your local library. They oftentimes have flyers or information about local job search support groups. If you just Google job search support group and then you put in your location, you'll find information that way. There are different types of job search support groups that are specific to different types of industries. For instance, there's FENG, F-E-N-G, which is Financial Executives Networking Group. There is ExecuNet, which is for higher level executives. There's a bunch of them out there. And if you just, as I said, your best bet really is Google on this one. And you can put in also like lists of job search support groups. Wall Street Journal has some information about it as well. Once you start to look, you'll find that there's plenty out there.
Great. And how do people find gig or temp or flex jobs in their area? What do you suggest?
Yeah, so several things. So I personally think one of the most effective things that you can do is to send, if you're looking for project work or gig work, is to send a targeted email to people in your network and let them know that you're available for gig work. I have seen that used very, very effectively. People who already know you are much more likely to hire you. Now, that said, obviously beyond that, tapping your network. And then there are a number of sites online where you can find gig work. My favorite site for finding gig work is actually a site called Side Hustle, spelled HUSL.com. And what Side Hustle is it's sort of like a Yelp for all of these different types of gig platforms that are out there. And it is run by somebody named Kathy Christoph. She's a journalist, and it's an incredible site. She has hundreds of these different gig platforms listed, and she reviews them, and she gives them like a 1 to 5 star rating, and then gives information as to why she thinks they're reliable or not reliable. So that can be a great resource as well. Another thing is I have written about a number of these sites. I mean, there's FlexJobs is a good site. You do pay a monthly fee to access FlexJobs, but I think it's really very little money. And I have followed FlexJobs for a long time now. You can do a trial membership with them. I think it's money well spent. I generally say you shouldn't have to pay for that information, but I think the amount they charge for what you get is reasonable. So you could try the trial membership and see if it works for you. It doesn't work for everybody. And increasingly, even sites like Indeed, you know, the larger job boards, you can filter your search when you go on there for part-time or temporary work as well. So a couple of ideas there.
And we do have someone saying Flex Professionals is another way to go.
Uh-huh.
So
Yeah.
also similar. What do you say about volunteering?
So I think volunteering is a great way to, well, I think volunteering is great for a number of reasons. And the first is volunteering because you feel like you're doing something productive and something worthwhile is just going to boost your spirits. And I think that's critically important when you're looking for work, because it's really easy to get down during a job search. So I think it provides a wonderful emotional boost. It gives you skills that you can put on your resume and LinkedIn profile. It expands your network. It gives you something to talk about. You know, if you've hit a point, particularly someone who is in an extended job search, which can be really, really tough. One of the really difficult things is when you go in and people say, well, what have you been doing with your time? It gives you something very positive to talk about. So volunteering, I think, is great for a number of reasons. You know, I think ideally you should try to volunteer in an arena that is going to give you exposure in an area that you'd be interested in working in. So if you're interested in jobs in healthcare, find a nonprofit that is somehow aligned with the healthcare industry. You can't always do it that way, but if you can, it's helpful.
Great. Now, what about our LinkedIn profiles? And we are going to have a program on LinkedIn. I just want to let everyone know coming up shortly. So if this is too much detail for the second segment, please let us know, Nancy. But this is something I hear from other people too. So when we do a resume or cover letter, we can change it for each job we apply for. But LinkedIn, you know, we can't easily do that. So do you have any just general suggestions about what to do if we're doing a little bit of a broader search?
Yeah, so it's a challenge with LinkedIn. Now, I will say that your LinkedIn headline, you now have more characters than they initially allowed on LinkedIn. So what you see is a lot of people go with sometimes 2 or 3 different areas of expertise on the LinkedIn profile. So, and people also, like, they might put you know, senior financial professional / banking industry / retail, you know, so you can put a couple of different target areas in there. But it is tricky. There's you know, no getting around it. And then what you want to do is you want to, within your profile, if you have more than one target area, is you want to integrate those words in there so that you'll get picked up for both of those areas. The challenge is to, you don't want to appear like a jack of all trades. The more focused you can be, the better you're served on LinkedIn. But it's a balancing act. It's tricky.
Do you have anything to say about Upwork.com?
I am really not that familiar with them.
Okay.
So they, there's a bunch of those sites out there. There's Upwork, there's Freelancer. Um, and, one of the things I say to people with any of these platforms where you post your information and you can sometimes bid on freelance work, is that the amount that you're going to earn from doing that is probably far less than what you would get if you found that work on your own. But it can be, if you're just getting started, those platforms can give you a good opportunity to test out your skills as a freelancer or as a contractor, to sort of see if this is a route that you want to pursue. So it can be a good way of testing things out, but long term, most people find they can earn a whole lot more money by really establishing their own website and through networking, finding their own gigs that way.
Great. Now, some people might be on unemployment, and the Division of Unemployment asks people to verify that they've done at least 3 things a week. And some people think that means applying through jobs the traditional way, submitting resumes and so on. Do you have any insights on how some of the tactics you said might be accepted by unemployment as legitimate job hunt strategies?
Yeah. So I have to admit, I am not an expert in that area, so I'd be hesitant to suggest that. Usually they do want to see something that you can document. So sending a letter, sending an email, I think anything where you have a paper trail is helpful. But beyond that, as I said, I am not an expert in that area. What I will tell you, is that, many of these government agencies right now are woefully understaffed. And so, they are not tracking this the way that they once did. But, that said, you do need to be careful.
And I know we're not emphasizing applying through job boards, and yet there's a whole bunch of conversation about the ATS systems, the applicant tracking systems.
Yeah.
Is there anything you have words of wisdom on that, even though that's not our first go-to discussion in this session?
Yeah. So the, applicant tracking systems are really used to screen out applicants. And so the best advice I can give people is you really need to look very carefully at the job description and make sure that the keywords that are used and the requirements that are stated in the job, that you include those in your resume. And that way there is a greater chance of you being matched up. This is one of the reasons, again, why I'm not a huge fan of applying to jobs through the job boards. The odds of your resume being thrown out on a technicality when you may be very well qualified for the job are strong. So, but sometimes, you look, there are times you see jobs that are advertised, and you want to respond. And so I just happen to see my friend Susan Joyce is commenting here. And by the way, Susan was the founder of a wonderful site called jobhunt.org. It was acquired, but it's a great site, tons of great information on there about the job hunt. And I know Susan has a lot of articles that address this issue and the technicalities behind it. And, I think that is an important point, Miriam, that if you put the time in, you will find there is a boatload of free information to help people with every aspect of the job search. And you don't want to get overwhelmed by it. And you don't want to, as I said, the most important energy that you can spend is energy on networking and doing informational interviews. That's where you ought to be spending your time. But, we all have those times where you just don't want to talk to people and you want to be doing some research. So take an hour, LinkedIn has all sorts of tutorials where you can learn about some of these things. Like I said, sites like job-hunt.org has lots of articles. So you can get answers to these questions. They are out there, and they're out there for free.
Great. And we are going to have, want to let everybody know, we will follow this up with the recording and also resources. So one of the questions is, how can people get in touch with you, Nancy? Is there
Sure.
your website or some way people can follow you?
Yeah. So my website is mylifestylecareer.com. And also I write for nextavenue.org. And I write about the job search at Next Avenue. If you go to mylifestylecareer.com, what you will see is that it's really oriented more towards people that are getting ready for retirement. That I've sort of shifted my focus a little bit. That's what I'm spending time on these days. And in terms of my coaching that I do, I work with people that are interested in getting retirement coaching. I'm no longer really doing the job search coaching. But you will find, I think, a lot of useful articles on my site, and Next Avenue has a lot of great information about the job search for people, specifically for people over 50, because there are a lot of challenges that people over 50 face that are different from younger people, for sure.
So we do have time for a few more questions if anybody wants to post any. And while people are reflecting on that, Nancy, do you have any last words of encouragement, or one thing someone can do today, this afternoon, if they want to get started on this?
Yeah, so hopefully people came away with a couple of different ideas. As I mentioned during the presentation, I think that you do want to spend some time taking a look at your LinkedIn profile and thinking about ways you might be able to beef that up. I think committing just 10 minutes 3 times a week to LinkedIn, to comment on people's articles, to share an article, you'll be amazed at how that will help you over time. Those are just really easy things that you can do to build momentum. And I think the more you can do that, you're feeling like you are moving forward, that you're doing positive things, it can really help you, your mood. And I think more so than anything else, keeping your spirits up during this process is a lot of, is just critical.
So we have a question here. How do you put yourself in a position to be recognized for a referral? I take that internal job referral in a company. So how does one get themselves ready to be referred?
Well, obviously you do a great job, and I don't mean to be coy about that, but you want to be somebody who's done a great job. I think sometimes you do need to, some people are not very good at tooting their own horn. And I think it really helps to share information about what you've done or what you've accomplished in subtle ways. This is a balancing act. Some people really come across as being obnoxious when they do that. But I think it is important to maybe share, hey, just completed, just shared a great conference, thrilled with the feedback that we got, put some of the credit on other people as well. And that helps it be, the news be received in the way that you intended. But I think it's important to let people know, what you've been up to, and LinkedIn can be a great forum for doing that.
And this may be a follow-up. If you're on the outside of a company and you would like to work in a company and get referred to that specific company, but you've never worked there, how can you be recognized as a potential referral from an employer?
Yeah, so that's where you have to, really look at your network and your extended. And again, this is where LinkedIn can be invaluable because they let you see connections of connections. I will tell you, for example, my daughter works for Nike, and Nike is, very popular company. Lots of people would love to get in there. She must get approached by people at least 2 times a week. Just saying, hey, I'd love to get some more information. Now, you don't want to be the person who, just comes in from left field. That's all you do. And then you disappear. This is about building long-term relationships, and it takes time. And I know that's really hard to hear when you're out of work because people say, I don't have the time right now. But when you get employed again, remember, it is about building and nurturing long-term relationships, because my daughter who works for Nike is not going to take meetings with everyone, but someone who helped her in the past, or someone who has been helpful to her in terms of sending information, she will take that meeting with them. So it's a long-term proposition. It doesn't happen overnight.
This may be a bigger question than what we're here to talk about today, but there have been some reports about social networking and the data collection that's going on and the lack of privacy and the surveillance. Do you have a couple of quick thoughts on that?
Yeah, it exists. It's out there. What I say to people is, anything you put out there, you have to assume is probably being collected by somebody somewhere. And you have to decide if that trade-off is worth it to you. I know of some people who refuse to have a LinkedIn profile for that reason. That's a personal decision, but you have to understand what the consequences are of doing that. So I think this speaks to the issue of don't put anything out there that you would not want to become public. So that means, photos, or you have to be really careful about things, in today's environment, political comments, anything that could be construed as divisive. I am continually amazed on LinkedIn. LinkedIn used to be very clean in terms of people commenting only about professional things. There's a lot of discussion now, particularly, and this is a bit of a generational thing. More younger people are expressing their political opinions and other personal struggles on LinkedIn. I think everyone has to make their own decisions about that. Some people really feel like that speaks to their authenticity, and that makes them a much more approachable person. And there's an argument to be made for that. But you have to decide what works for you, and particularly in the industry that you want to be in. In some industries, that would not play well at all. So it's tricky. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, just assume whatever you put out there is not private.
Can you say something about networking through our college alumni associations? They have a lot of organizations and they're pushing Handshake and things like that. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I am so glad that you brought that up, because I think alumni networks are a terrific resource. So, and really underutilized. I've spoken with a lot of people who are affiliated with their college alumni offices, and a lot of people don't go back to them. And, once you graduate from somewhere, you can go back to your college alumni networking and use their networking services. And a lot of them have networking directories. They run classes. They offer all sorts of different services. And typically they are either free or very, very inexpensive. And, having that connection with people really helps when you're trying to establish a new networking connection. So when someone reaches out to me who went to the same college as me, that automatically grabs my attention. They find the common point. So it can be if you have a connection because you went to the same college together. Some companies also have, some of the larger companies have alumni networks. So, someone writes somebody and says, hey, I'm a former Arthur Andersen person. Again, my husband worked for Arthur Andersen way back when. They don't even exist anymore. But if he gets something from someone who worked there, he responds. If he gets something from somebody who went to his college because it was relatively small, he responds. So the key is to find that common connection that really can make a big difference.
Great. Well, Thank you. Thank you so much, Nancy, for all this information. A lot of information in a short amount of time. I really encourage people to view this again, and also the chat. You can save the chat by clicking the little dots at the bottom of it because there was a ton of information. I also want to thank Kendra Mrozik for her technical support and our program co-sponsor 50 Plus Job Seekers, which is at 50plusjobseekers.org. I encourage you to let us know in the chat, what one thing are you going to do today based on what you heard? What have you been motivated to do for your next step? Any other feedback? We're getting a lot of thank yous. Feedback about the webinar. I'm always looking for ideas for future programs. As we said, the session has been recorded. You'll get a link soon. And any other information we'll include with that. Again, we encourage you to go to our website, encorebostonnetwork.org, to find out more. We have a lot of upcoming events related to job hunting, including, as we said, something specially on LinkedIn. We also have something coming up. I'm telling you this now before it's been publicized, so here's another example on networking at the end of November, so look for that. We have a program coming up shortly on franchises. It's not just Wendy's and fast food and hotels, although you may want one of those, but it's also things like IT, professional coaching, and that'll be really interesting. And we have our Age-Friendly Employer Forum on November 2nd, and that's just a small amount of what we have coming up. All of it is free. Please feel free to join us. I want to thank you again for participating. Again, many thanks to Nancy. And I wish you all success in your job hunt.